On March 1st, 2007, Dawn Boyd received a telephone call from a staff member of Alternative Youth Achievements, a wilderness therapy program where her son was in attendance. They told her that her son Caleb was behaving badly and that they were going to have to extend his 60-day treatment. This devastated Dawn. She had only seen her son briefly in the past 8 months, and all she wanted was to hold him again. The very next day, she received another call. This call was from a corporate officer of the same company. Caleb had been discovered, his lifeless body curled up in his sleeping bag, soaked in urine and feces. There are many stories of abuse at wilderness therapy programs. This is Caleb Jensen's story. Viewer discretion is advised. Caleb Jensen was born on September 11, 1991, to Dawn and Joel Jensen. He grew up in a normal household and was a loved child that enjoyed art and poetry. He particularly enjoyed writing. According to those who knew him well, he was extremely creative and a very talented writer. He grew up in Salt Lake City, and by his teenage years, he had begun to get into a little bit of trouble. He spent 6 months at a juvenile detention center, then was released on probation. While on probation, he was caught shoplifting a t-shirt. Though most people would think that shoplifting a t-shirt would garner a simple slap on the wrist, this simple act of defiance would put Caleb on a path to torture and eventual death. Alternative Youth Adventures, or AYA, was a wilderness therapy program that billed itself as a professional organization that treated troubled youth. They would take troubled and at-risk children out on hiking and camping adventures and utilize team-building methods to inspire children and get them back on the right path. AYA had been in operation for approximately 11 years, with programs in Utah, Montana, South Carolina, and the newest one in Colorado, in which Caleb would soon find himself. AYA was meant to follow the therapy process developed by Aspen Achievement Academies. The Aspen Achievement Academy program accepted children between the ages of 13 and 17 with a history of moderate to severe emotional and behavioral problems, such as low self-esteem, low academic achievement, substance abuse, and family problems. The minimum length of stay was 35 days, but this may be extended as recommended by the camp staff. The camp staff was young people in their 20s. They were not therapists or doctors. They went through a 2-week training and pruning process before they were hired, then went through in-the-field training before they were put in charge of the campers. Unlike many others, Caleb actually knew that he would be attending the wilderness therapy camp. Caleb's attendance at the wilderness camp was court-ordered. The state of Utah had placed 20 juveniles in AYA programs that year. In fact, AYA had a contract with the state, as they were the first wilderness program licensed by the state of Utah. A judge could and did sentence juveniles under the age of 21 to attend the program. If the judge sentenced a juvenile to a wilderness therapy camp, because of the contract, AYA was the camp that the juvenile would attend. Caleb was one of these attendees. Though we don't know Caleb's original offense, we do know that he failed to comply with his probation by shoplifting the t-shirt. He returned to court, where the Department of Juvenile Justice Services staff recommended that he be placed in the wilderness therapy program. They put him through a physical, checking his health and making sure that he was able to complete the wilderness activities. They also had his background health information, which showed that Caleb was prone to infections from a skin condition called impetigo. These infections would typically show up as sores on Caleb's face, which were easily recognizable. In fact, during the 7 months that he was in the juvenile detention center, he was treated multiple times for staph infections. Therefore, the Utah State Juvenile Justice Services knew of his history with staph infections. It is not clear if this information was passed from the state to AYA. However, AYA had Caleb's medical history that included this information. Caleb also underwent his first therapy and mental health session, which would periodically be repeated throughout his time in the wilderness. After he was determined to be mentally and physically capable, Caleb was entered into the AYA Wilderness Therapy Program. He was dropped off by the state of Utah on a rugged plateau near Grand Junction in southwest Colorado, along with 26 other participants. Over the first 26 days, by all accounts that we have, Caleb did well, though the camp was grueling, and the staffers later said that Caleb had behavioral problems from the beginning. The campers were forced to hike miles each day with little water and food while carrying all of their belongings on their backs. According to the wilderness model developed by Aspen Achievement Academy, the campers would also participate in bonding and team-building exercises. For example, the campers would use a series of boards to form a bridge across an imaginary pit of crocodiles without touching the ground. So over the first 28 days, Caleb participated in the activities, the hikes, the physical tests, the fireside chats, and the therapy sessions. During this time, the campers were also allowed to send letters to loved ones. Caleb sent letters to his mom. He wrote that he had to climb mountains every day until he was exhausted. He was only able to wash twice a week using tiny amounts of water. He had to clean his dishes after meals by licking them and then use dirt to scour them. On April 25th, Caleb lost control of his bodily functions and repeatedly soiled himself. He also exhibited obvious signs of infection, including blisters, scratches, sores on his face, and a swollen knee. He was given ibuprofen and an over-the-counter anti-diarrheal medicine. When this didn't work, he was simply told to wear a diaper. Over the next few days, other campers relayed their worry to staffers. As Caleb became sicker and more disconnected, they stated that Caleb was going crazy and talking to non-existent people. They were told by the staff to, quote, worry about themselves. Though the campers didn't know it at the time, it was later revealed that the staff did call back to the main office, communicating Caleb's status. Between April 29th and May 2nd, they made several calls to emergency medical technician Ben Askins, camp director Jim Omer, and other AYA staff. However, their calls went completely unanswered. No one responded to the calls and no medication was sent to the staff. On May 1st, Caleb's mother, Dawn, received a phone call from the staff at AYA. Nothing was said of her son's sores, of his swollen knee, of the fact that he had lost control of his bowels 6 days before. The only information that they relayed to Dawn was that Caleb's behavior was bad and that he would have to stay longer than expected. The next day, March 2nd, was a rest day. Caleb stayed in his sleeping bag until afternoon when it was 81 degrees. He then got out of his sleeping bag and was sitting on top of it. A staffer walked by, and Caleb told the staffer that he was feeling sick and needed help. 10 minutes later, another staff member came by to check on Caleb, and he was dead. His lifeless body curled up in his sleeping bag, soaked in urine and feces. Dawn later recounted her son's final letter to her, where he wrote that he wished he could go back and be a naive little church boy again. The letter ended, P.S. I want my mommy. 7 days later, the Colorado Office of Licensing suspended AYA's child care license. This action nullified the contract between the state of Utah and AYA. This was the first time that they had lost their license, but it wasn't the first time that their license had been in jeopardy. In 2002, 5 years before Caleb arrived at AYA, the Utah Department of Human Services placed AYA on corrective action after they failed to provide proper and timely treatment to a child in their custody. AYA changed their policy, requiring staff in the field to conduct a more thorough assessment of injuries. The staff was also trained to override the medical professionals and remove attendees if they felt necessary. They also included in their policy this statement: under no circumstances should a complaint be allowed to continue more than 48 hours without removal for further evaluation. Prosecutors alleged that Caleb had told staff members that he was sick, that it was clear that he was sick by the sores on his face and the fact that he had lost control of his bowels. They alleged that while he was sick, staffers dragged him by his wrist to finish hikes because they thought he was faking. Caleb's autopsy showed that he had been severely ill for at least several days to a week with the infection. Robert Kurtzman, the forensic pathologist that performed the autopsy, stated that the employees at Alternative Youth Adventure failed to perceive a substantial and unjustifiable risk to the well-being of Caleb Jensen by interpreting his symptoms solely as manipulative. The attorneys stated that Caleb's death was tragic, but no wrongdoing had occurred. However, a Colorado grand jury brought charges against the company, Dr. Hooker, who oversaw the medical department, the EMT Ben Askins, and the director Jim Omer. All faced charges. Prior to Caleb's death, Dr. Keith Hooker had not been contacted and was not aware of Caleb's situation, so he had no knowledge of the situation. The judge also found that Askins and Omer had no wrongdoing or no liability. These charges were also dropped. Furthermore, CEC's attorneys argued that Caleb had issues with behavior well before he got sick and that any signs of infection were anything but obvious. Therefore, the staffers did not notice the signs and were already averse to his behavior. The judge dropped the criminal case against CEC. Caleb's mother still had a civil suit against Omer Askins Hooker and the CEC. In 2013, 6 years after the death of Caleb Jensen, the civil suit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. There are currently 25 privately run therapeutic wilderness programs and hundreds of government-run and non-profit organizations conducting wilderness therapy. Though many people leave these programs with a renewed sense of life, stating that they are effective, many also leave with post-traumatic stress disorder, and many go as far as to state that they are survivors of child abuse. There are also stories every year that children die from neglect or abuse at these camps. If you or a loved one is struggling with PTSD from a wilderness therapy program, there is help. Please see the links in the description below. This is True Mysteries. Please like, leave comments, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.